Okay, so this video is about Washizu mahjong, and if you've ever seen Akagi, you probably know it from that. But it's also been implemented in Mahjong Soul recently, and it's called the Battle of Clairvoyance there, but it's the same thing. So this video is going to go over hand reading and different types of things that you can look at to make it really easy to understand, like when someone's in tenpai, what their weights might be, and some other reads that you can make based on the things that you can see. So if you just try to process each hand individually, it can get really complicated and overwhelming. So this stuff will help make it so that you have some general rules to follow and make a lot of processing really easy. But like this note says, it's still important to be able to efficiently build your hand. So if you want to be really good, that's still really important and a big part of this. But this hand reading stuff can be really helpful in making sure you don't dill into certain hands, and it can make it so that you can push in situations where otherwise you might want to fold. So the big idea to start with is reads based on block counts. So if you can So if you count the number of visible blocks that someone has, you can get a lot of information from that. And the first piece of information is whether or not someone's tenpai. So if you look at someone's hand and the visible part of their hand has less than 5 blocks in it, it means they can possibly be tenpai, and their weight can kind of be anywhere because it can be made out of opaque tiles. So it can kind of be anywhere. I'll talk about that more later, but that's a pretty complicated case, but the person can be tenpai. That's what you should know. Now if they have exactly 5 blocks in the visible part of their hand, they can be tenpai, but you know all their weights are around the visible blocks. So I'll also talk about that more later, but that's a very nice case for you because their weights are very limited and it's pretty easy to process. So you know they might be tenpai and you have a good idea of what their weights might be. And if they have more than 5 blocks in the visible part of their hand, it means that they're guaranteed to not be tenpai unless it's 7 pairs or kokushi. And usually you can tell if it's one of those. So that's really useful because you might be wondering if someone could possibly be tenpai. All you have to do is like count the blocks in their hand, and it's like more than 5 means you know they're not tenpai. It's not possible, except for 7 pairs or kokushi. So when you're actually counting blocks, if someone has a called meld, that counts as 1 block, and then any group of tiles that can be used up in a single pair or a single meld are part of the same block, so that would count as 1 block. So as an example, if you see 2, 2, that's 2 tiles, but it counts as 1 block because it can be used up in a pair. Or 2, 4, that's 1 block because you can make 2, 3, 4. Or 2, 3, or 2, 2, 2, or a lone 2. A lone 2 is also 1 block because it you have to use it somehow, so it has to form a block in your hand. And as some more examples, these would be 2 block shapes because you can't use them as just a pair or just a single meld. So if you have a 2, 2, 3, that's 2 blocks because if you take out the 2s as a pair, there's still a 3 left over. So um, you have to have 2 blocks there. Or even if you took it out as a 1, 2, 3 or a 2, 3, 4, you still have an extra 2 left over, so that's 2 blocks. And for this for this type of analysis, 2, 4, 6 as well would be 2 blocks because you could make the 2, 3, 4, but you still have a 6 left over. And in the same way, like 3, 5, 6 is 2 blocks, 3, 4, 4, 5 is 2 blocks, and a 2 and a 5, that's 2 blocks as well. So now let's talk about the 5 visible block case. So again, this is the very nice case. So when you're playing the game, there's a lot of information to process, but if you can look at someone's hand, for example, if they declare reach and you look at it and their hand has 5 visible blocks, you can really easily limit what their weights can be. So if they have a 5 visible block 10 pi, then the weights are known to be tiles that complete the visible blocks, and it can't be anything outside of that. So if it's like a single tile, it can be within the range of plus or minus 2 of that number tile. If it's an honor tile, then it has to be the same honor tile. And there is some complexity if the blocks are close together, and I'll talk about that in these examples, but that's really useful information because it's easy to look at. You can say, okay, for example, in this hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks. It's 5-block case. Now I know all the tiles outside of those 5 blocks are 100% safe to the player. And I don't have to do any other thinking, any other analysis. It's just, okay, 5 blocks. Everything outside of those blocks is safe. So now let's get into this example. It is 5 blocks, like I said. And so there's a 6-8. The only tile there that can complete a 6-8 as one block is a 7. So the 7 is dangerous, but every other bamboo tile is guaranteed safe. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9 bamboo is guaranteed safe to this player. And you know that because they have 5 blocks. Again, you want to count the blocks, it's 5 blocks. And so all the tiles outside of those blocks are 100% safe. So let's look at this character tile suit. This 1-3 can only be completed by a 2 of characters. So everything outside of that is safe. So like 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and technically 7 and 9 as well are also safe. So for this pair of 8s that you can see, because it's a pair, the only way to complete it as a block is with another one. So you can add in another 8, and that could potentially be their weight. So the 8 of characters is dangerous, but the 9, 7, and 6 are safe in this case because it's a pair, and you can't complete a block with a pair of 8s and a 6 or a 7 or a 9. So basically it can't be a run because it's a pair. So with that, we know almost all the bamboo tiles are safe, almost all the character tiles are safe. Now let's look at the circle tiles. So there's 2 blocks here, and this one becomes a bit more complex. So there's the 4, 5, 6. You could look at it as a 4, 5, 6 and a lone 7, or you can look at it as a 5, 6, 7 and a lone 4. So because there's those 2 interpretations, the weight is actually very wide. So there's the 7. It could be a lone 7, so it could be plus or minus 2 from the lone 7. So it could be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 could be potentially their winning tile. But it could also be a lone 4, so it could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as their potential winning tile. So that means almost every circle tile is dangerous against this hand except for the 1. So for an example of why it might be like the 9, if that opaque tile was an 8, then they have like a 7-8 weight for a 9. But if that opaque tile was a 9, they could be waiting on the 8. And if it's the 7 like it is, they could be waiting on the 7 to improve it to a triplet. And you can go through all the different examples to figure out why all those weights are possibilities. But the whole idea here is that you don't have to do that. You just say it's like 5 block 10 pi, and then it's plus or minus 2 from a lone tile. So it's a lone 7. So plus or minus 2 from the lone 7 is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Plus or minus 2 from the lone 4 is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And all of those form the potential weights. So again, even though there's like quite a few opaque tiles here, because it's 5 visible block 10 pi, you can really reduce it down. Now for this bottom hand, this is also, so it has 1 call, and then has 1, 2, 3, 4 visible blocks plus the call, which makes the 5th block. So it's again a 5 visible block 10 pi, and you can really limit the weights down. So The only character tile weight it could possibly be is the 7 of characters. Every other character tile is 100% safe. The only bamboo tile weight it could be is the 5 of bamboo. Every other bamboo tile is 100% safe. And then you get this, what's visible is the 3, 5, 6, 7. So it could be plus or minus 2 from the 3. So it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in this case, yeah, it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so there's that. But again, because the 3 is close to the 5, 6, 7, it adds complexity. So it could also be a 3, 5 and a 6, 7. So that would mean that there's 2 incomplete blocks in a different way. So if it's 3, 5, and 6, 7, that would add the 4 and then the 5 and the 8 as potential weights as well. So it could be a 3 lone tile and a 5, 6, 7, which would make for a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 potential weight. Or it could be a 3, 5, 6, 3, 5 as a group and a 6, 7 as a group, which would make 4, 5, and 8 as potential weights. But overall, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 of circles are dangerous, and everything else is safe. So, because you can see 5 visible blocks, you know a whole bunch of safe tiles, and it can't be any kind of like tricky weight, unless, of course, again, if it was like Chi Toitsu or something like that, 7 bears. Now for another simple tip, so if you have an opaque honor tile, then you know where all of it is, because there's only one opaque one, and you can see all the other ones. So that means you don't have to be worried about it. There's nothing like tricky or surprising about it, except for, Tonki weights or single tile weights. But, so if you have an opaque honor tile, and people don't have any visible of that in their hand, then you know that they don't have it and they can't use it unless they have Kokushi, which again would probably be pretty obvious. But so if you draw like a Dora tile that's an honor tile, like a dragon, you don't have to be scared of it if it's the opaque one, because you know people can't have it because there's only one of it. And then if people only have one visible, then you know they don't have a pair of it, and you can just discard it safely, unless they're like tenpai and they have a tonki weight on it or a single tile weight on it, which in some cases is possible, but in a lot of cases that's not what you're worried about. So that's another tip that's pretty simple to implement. Now, guaranteed weights is actually really useful too, and it's not too complicated, but it's a little bit more complicated than just like the 5 block stuff. I'd say it's still not too bad though. It just takes more like, you have to look a lot more and be aware of the tiles on the board and the weights that people have and things like that. So for a guaranteed weight situation to happen, if the player's in tenpai and they have a visible incomplete shape, and you can see all the opaque tiles that would complete the shape, then the weight is guaranteed to be that. And you don't have to process anything else about the hand, you know what their weight is. And it's easiest to process for just a single weight, just because you only have to look for one opaque tile. So if someone has like a visible 8, 9, and you can see an opaque 7, you know their weight is on the 7. And again, that case is easier to look for because all you have to look for is that one opaque 7. So another way to get a guaranteed weight is if you know all the possible weights someone has, and you can eliminate all of them except one. So I'll go over examples of both of that in this one hand. So in this hand, the player across from me and the player to the left of me are both tenpai, and in this specific situation, I knew both of their weights exactly while playing. So for this player across from me, before we look at anything else, we see they have an 8 and a 9 of circles, So that's an incomplete weight that we can see, and we can also see the opaque 7 of circles that completes it. So we know they don't have a 7, but they have an 8, 9, and they've declared reach, so they're in 10 pi. So that means the 7 is 100% their winning tile, and nothing else has to be processed. So even though it looks like, so they have a pair of green dragons visible, and they have a pair of 3 of characters visible, and we can't see the pair being completed as a triplet in either of those. So the green dragon might look really dangerous, but if I drew it, I could discard it 100% safely because I know their weight is the 7. That's guaranteed. And then for this player on the left, they have a 5 block visible case. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 blocks. So that means all their weights are around the visible blocks. There's a 7, 8 waiting on a 6 or a 9, and there's a 4, 6 waiting on a 5. So it's either a 6, 9 of circles or a 5 of bamboo. So the 9 of circles got discarded, and they didn't call wrong, so that means it's guaranteed 5 of bamboo unless they pass to win. But if they pass to win, then they're free regen, and you don't have to worry anyway. So I can guarantee this person's weight is the 5 of bamboo because there were 2 possibilities and one of them got eliminated. So there's only one possibility left. I can guarantee this person's weight is the 7 of circles because I have the dark tile that completes the 7, 8, 9. And I can see the 8, 9. So now I can play against their hands perfectly. I can push everything except for their winning tiles. So even if I get, like I was saying, the opaque green dragon, which looks really dangerous, I know it's 100% safe in this situation. And then finally, for the player on the right, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 visible blocks. It's a bit hard to tell when the opaque tiles are mixed into the hand, but they have 6 visible blocks because they have an 8, 9, 9 visible, that's 2 blocks. They have a 3, 4, 5, 5, that's 2 blocks. 6, 7, and 2, 4, that's 2 more blocks. So that's 6 blocks. So they're guaranteed not 10 pi right now. And I can know that. So that means I can play against everyone's hands perfectly in this situation. Now here it gets a bit more complicated. So if someone is 10 pi, but they have less than 5 visible blocks, it becomes a lot more complicated because there's the possibility of opaque tile weights because they have to have a 5th block somewhere, and it could be any of the opaque tiles that they have, so that can kind of be anything. But the opaque tile weights are limited by the known opaque tiles, so again, this is a lot more processing, so it becomes harder to make use of in game, but if you practice it, it's still reasonable to do. So known opaque tiles function similar to how walls function in regular Mahjong. So in regular Mahjong, a wall would be when you can see all 4 of a tile, so you know that people can't have run weights with that tile. So like if you see all of the 4s, people can't have a 3, 4, so it's less likely they're waiting on a 2. Or they can't have like a 4, 5, so it's less likely they're waiting on a 3. And they can't have a 2, 4. So things like that. So if someone has less than 5 blocks in their 10 pi and they have a known and you know where like an opaque 4 is, it means they can't have an opaque weight with the 4. So the 2 and 3 become more likely safe because like I was saying, they can't have a 3, 4 or 4, 5 weight. But this opaque tile is slightly more dangerous because they could have a 2, 3 like opaque tiles, or they could have 5, 6, and you know they don't have the 4 because you have the opaque 4. So also, if you can see neighboring opaque tiles, then sometimes you can have 100% safe situations. So like if you can see an opaque 2 and an opaque 3, then you know the 2 is safe because they can't have a 1, 3 or a 3, 4 because you see the opaque 3. So they can't have a hidden 1-3 or a hidden 3-4, and then they can't have a tonky weight or pair weight on the 2 because you see the opaque 2. Now, if they have a visible weight there, like if you can see the opaque 2 and 3, but if they have a visible 2 and 3, then they can have a weight on the 1 or the 4 or the 2 or the 3, things like that. So like this is for areas where, because like their opaque tiles could be anything. So when someone has less than 5 blocks in their tenpai, their winning tile could be any tile that completes a visible block. But if it's not one of those, it could also be any opaque tile weight. And then this is for limiting those opaque tile weights. And then guaranteed weights still apply, so that's really useful because if you can find some kind of situation where someone has an incomplete shape like an 8-9 and you see the opaque 7, that's a guaranteed weight, and even if their hand was a less than 5 block case, you know what their weight is and you don't have to do any more processing. You just know their weight. So the guaranteed weight idea still applies, and that would make it really easy if you can find one of those. Now, here it gets even more complicated, but you can read if someone can have a tonki weight or a single weight waiting to make a pair. So if someone has a pair that you can see in their hand, then you know that they don't have a tonki weight if they have a guaranteed pair and they don't have a 7-pair hand again. So how you could know someone has a pair in their hand is if they have a pair that's not part of a run, and then and then you know where the opaque tile is, so they don't have the opaque tile to make a triplet. Then you know that's a pair, and they can't have a tonki weight anywhere or a single tile weight anywhere. So, for example, like if they just had 2 visible 8s, and you can see the opaque 8 of that same suit, then you know you don't have to worry about the tonki case. And also, if they have a single tile that can't make a run, for example, like an honor tile, or a number tile where the neighboring opaque tile is known, like if they have a 9 and you can see the opaque 8 and they just have 1 9, then you know that tile can't make a run, so it has to be a pair or it has to be the tonki weight. And the reason this is important is because when people have opaque tile weights that could be anything, they could also be any tonki weight, which really increases the possibilities. So for example, if there's an opaque 3, the 2 and the 1 are pretty safe. Like if you know where the opaque 3 is, the 2 and the 1 are pretty safe, but they could still deal into tonki weights. And sometimes people try to be tricky and just like keep a random opaque tile somewhere and use that as a tonki weight, thinking that people might not be able to predict it, and that's kind of true. So weights like that can be easy to deal into if you're not careful, but in some situations like the ones I'm talking about, you can guarantee that they don't have those kinds of tonki weights. So then a known like opaque 3 would make the 1 and 2 guaranteed safe. And then a known opaque 4 would make the 2 and 3 really likely safe, and they can't deal into tonki weights. And so again, these are the cases where you could know that they can't have a tonki weight like that, and that's if you know they have a pair somewhere or they have a single tile somewhere that can't make a run. Now, for the types of possibilities that people could have with a tonki weight, this can be pretty useful and is easier to like process in an actual game. So if someone has like a known Tonki weight situation where they have, for example, like 4 calls and they just have one tile that's an opaque tile, or if all their melds are visible and then they just have like an opaque tile somewhere, that could be anything. Well, their weight can't necessarily be anything because you're going to know that all the opaque tiles are safe that you can see. So, like, if you can see an opaque 3, you know that their Tonki weight can't be on the 3 because you can see the 3. So, that's safe. And if there's like a discarded opaque tile, you know that tile is safe against the Tonki weight. Now, there's one exception because people can have combo weights. So, for example, if someone has a 2, 3, 4 visible and then an opaque tile, um, let's say you can see the opaque 2, so you think that the 2 has to be safe because that question mark tile can't be a 2. Well, it could be a 5, so they could have a 2, 3, 4, 5 waiting on a 2 or a 5. So they could still have a weight on the 2. So these types of combo weights can make other different tiles dangerous. The same thing with the 1 and 4. If you could see the 1 or the 4, it doesn't necessarily mean it's safe against the Tonki weight because could have a like combination weight. But if it's like a lone honor tile, if you can see opaque the opaque honor tile, then you know it's safe. Now, overall, like for some final thoughts, you can do more complex analysis of a specific situation and get more information from it, but that becomes more difficult to do, especially on a time limit. And I think there's probably more skill to Washizu than regular Mahjong just because there's so much more information, so you can do a lot more and know a lot more. But overall, it's still a luck-based game, and you can't stop someone from like declaring reach and then getting Ipatsu Sumo with 3 Urador or stuff like that. Anything can happen, and it's still very much a luck-based game, and um, anyone can win any single game. So, but I do think there's probably more skill to Washizu. Now, probably the easy part to apply is just counting blocks and then the 5 block case. So, without getting into anything too complex, if you just know, alright, if you just know if they have 5 or less visible blocks, they might be 10 pi, and if they have more than that, they're guaranteed not 10 pi. That's pretty easy to remember and count in a game. And then, if you understand the idea, if it's exactly 5 visible blocks, all their weights are around those visible blocks, or they complete those visible blocks. If you know that, you can quickly eliminate a whole bunch of possibilities, and you don't have to think too much about it. And then again, neighboring blocks can be a little complicated, so that would take some practice to make sure you have down correctly, but even that isn't too bad. Guaranteed weights are very powerful, and you can use them in game, but it's a bit harder to process because you have to like process what potential weights someone has, and then you have to look for the opaque tiles that you can see and see if any of those complete any of the weights that someone could have. So that's a bit harder to process, but if you can do it, it can be really useful. And then the less than 5 block case gets complicated. There's some useful information there that you can use where, like, when you know opaque tiles that can't be in someone's hand, it really limits down the possibilities. And the easy way to think of it is like tiles outside of those opaque tiles that you can see are a lot more likely to be safe. Like if you can see a 4, the 2 and the 3 are a lot more likely to be safe. If you can see a 7, the 8 and the 9 are a lot more likely to be safe. And with a 5, the 3 and the 7 are a lot more likely to be safe. So you can just kind of remember it like that. The tiles outside of the opaque tiles you can see are a lot more likely to be safe. But again, if they have an incomplete shape that you can see around there that's waiting on that tile, then it might be dangerous, of course. But there might be some more stuff too that could be generalized, but overall, these are the ideas I came up with for now. So I think some of them are pretty useful and easy to use. So hopefully it helps someone. Thanks for watching.